If the first duty of the state is to protect the life, liberty, and property of its people, it might seem as though modern Western states have failed. We, the people, have been subject to all manner of abuses, encroachments, and infringements on our lives, our liberty, and our property. For most of 2020, nationwide, our cities were looted, pillaged, and burned. The state hardly lifted a finger to stop it while it was going on, and they certainly did nothing to prosecute the perpetrators after the fact. For decades and decades and decades, with a very sharp uptick in recent years, we've had millions and millions and millions of illegal immigrants, people with no cultural or genetic ties to us, the descendants of those who fought, bled, and died over every inch of this land, pouring over our border.
No! You have a perfect civilization! Why would you want to add it?
An unchecked tidal wave of people coming into this country, gaining American citizenship illegitimately, driving down real wages, increasing the cost of housing, lowering the overall American standard of living. These are people with average IQs much lower than ours, who are culturally incompatible with Western society. And what's worse, they're granted real political agency in this country. They're granted the vote. They reshape this nation by their very presence in a way that is actively harmful to us, the people who the founders meant by ourselves and our posterity.
They took our jobs! Yeah, they took our jobs! They did!
And without getting too far into the weeds on all the ills of mass illegal immigration from third world countries, many find themselves looking at this situation and wondering why the government hasn't done anything real to stop it, when it's clearly within their power. We have the world's most powerful military. We have the capability to stop this stuff outright, and we actively choose not to.
We have the technology.
It seems very bizarre until you consider one thing. The powers that be, they no longer represent people like you and I. We are the subversive element now. The powers that be don't represent you. They don't care about you. You're not their people. You're simply a subversive element. People like you and I stand in the way of their achieving their long-term goals. We're a threat to them.
Red detected. Threat detected. Code red. Code red.
And they're going to treat us as such. No, the people they represent are the other races, religions, and ethnicities from across the planet who hate people like you and I, who see the prosperity of this nation and the West broadly and want to seize it for themselves. We have no institutional power. We have no backing in the government. Nobody is actually on our side, and nobody is coming to save us. There's no strong man today that we can vote into power and fix everything. There's no foreign nation out there aligned with our interests that's going to come help us. You can't count on anyone to protect you but yourself. The military isn't based. Many police departments are corrupt, or at the very least, under corrupt leadership. So, all this sounds pretty bleak, right? Yeah, I'll grant you that. Things don't look so great. Hell, things are probably so bad that there's nothing we can do about it, right? No.
Wrong.
All the powers of the world that align themselves against us, we have one thing that they don't. You. The finest human capital on the globe. Descendants of pioneers, conquerors, revolutionaries, the people who made the Western world what it is today. I can guarantee you that men like you and I are not going to go quiet into that good night. You and I still have a rendezvous with destiny. Men like you and I need to step up and be prepared to be the heroes that we so desperately need. I hate to break it to you, but things aren't getting any better anytime soon. In fact, more likely than not, things are going to get a hell of a lot worse. I can almost guarantee you that within our lifetimes, we're going to see years that make 2020 look like a joke. And it's not necessarily something that we have to be so black-pilled about, something that we have to despair over. If anything, we might consider ourselves fortunate that in our time, we have so clear a purpose laid out in front of us. But if we're going to build a better world for tomorrow, if we're going to build a more perfect union for ourselves and for our posterity, the first order of business is stepping up and doing what our government has failed to do for us, which is our first duty, our primary duty, to protect our family and to protect our community. We, people like you and I, should collectively be ashamed that the rioting and looting of 2020 was allowed to take place because we, in absence of the government, had the power to stop it if we chose to do so. We collectively should be embarrassed. We should be ashamed. We should be humiliated that we, founding stock Americans, have so easily given up our birthright and surrendered it to foreigners.
Shame. Shame.
If we want to fix this very broken society, we have to step up, get serious, and take some risks. Now, before we talk about what that might look like, I'd like to talk about a couple of things that it certainly does not look like. Do not, I say again, do not go out there and commit acts of domestic terrorism. And I say this not because I'm a coward or because I'm afraid of getting vanned by the federal government.
Looks like you're going to the Shadow Realm, Jimbo.
Or afraid of getting my channel deleted or something. I'm saying it because it's true. I'm not really interested in rehashing this subject. I've made a pretty darn good video on the subject that I'll link here and in the description. But don't click away, we're having a discussion. If you do, I swear to God,
I'll get you, and I'll look like a bloody accident.
In any case, suffice to say for now that committing acts of domestic terrorism or taking up arms directly against the government is precisely what they want. Why do you think the FBI and other three-letter agencies spend so much time and invest so much in the way of resources into getting people on the far right to do this? People who think they know a thing or two about war want to talk about guerrilla or asymmetric warfare and how a guerrilla force would always come out on top, and therefore that's a course of action we should take, not understanding that the asymmetry in asymmetrical warfare means that you're pitting your strength against an enemy's weakness. Right, wrong, or indifferent, right now, the government has a monopoly on the legitimate use of force, and they're far better at it than we are. They're far better equipped than we are, and we would either lose or the victory would be so costly that we may as well have lost. Moreover, any direct action or direct confrontation with the federal government would give them the excuses they've been wanting for a long time to step on snakes, so to speak. I mean, just look at what happened to a certain group of individuals who may or may not have entered a certain government building on a particular day in January of 2020. Any event like that would be spinned and portrayed a certain way in the controlled media. They'd use that event to get the public at large to froth at the mouth and hate people like you and turn a blind eye to infringements on your liberty, infringements of a type that would render you politically inert. But just because that course of action would be foolish doesn't mean that we are without options entirely. What I'm advocating for is a solution that would present the government with a no-win situation.
I don't believe in the no-win scenario.
If the government refuses to protect your life, liberty, and property, as they've done for decades and decades, guess what? It's not only your right, but your duty to protect it for yourself. There have been multiple court rulings issued in recent years that have indicated that law enforcement agencies don't actually have a duty to protect you. You're never going to be able to force them to enforce the law as you want it enforced. But guess what? There's not much in the way of actual special privilege that is given to law enforcement agencies that allow them to enforce the law. In many, if not most respects, they're regular citizens like you and I. For the moment, we the people still have the right to assemble. We the people still have the right to keep and bear arms. We the people still have the right to enforce the law ourselves and prevent crimes in progress. So let's band together and do so. During the 2020 riots, there were many instances where BLM and Antifa and these other organizations threatened to come out to the suburbs and indeed made good on that threat. However, when these groups were met with armed citizens who lived in those communities, who really did nothing beyond stand at the entrance to that community with a rifle in hand, the looting and the pillaging, it didn't happen. They tucked tail and ran rather than stand toe-to-toe with an armed citizenry who was willing to protect their homes.
Was this story based? Yes.
Generally speaking, these people who did that sort of thing met with no legal repercussions. So this is proof of concept. We can still form a parallel structure. We can still exercise our people's veto and enforce the law. Now, to qualify this, remember I said, generally speaking, there are a couple notable examples where people doing this sort of thing did end up in legal trouble. The two most notable examples off the top of my head would be the whole Kyle Rittenhouse Kenosha shooting case and the St. Louis gun-toting incident.
If you thought this story was based, you're right.
It's beyond the scope of this video to dissect those incidents here, but suffice to say that we have to be very, very careful in what we do and how we do it, because there are a lot of people out there who want to inflict the law on people like you and I and put us behind bars. Now, in both of these incidents, after lengthy court battles, the people involved ended up being okay. Judging by Kyle Rittenhouse's social media, that whole shooting incident was probably financially the best thing to ever occur to him. In the St. Louis gun-toting incident, the people involved ended up pleading down to a lesser charge, and then they ended up being pardoned, but long-term, they're okay. Generally speaking, juries and governors of red states are going to be pretty sympathetic to people being forced by an ineffective government, an ineffective police force, into defending their own homes. These aren't sure things, though. Your mileage may vary. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not familiar with the self-defense law in any state but my own. So the obvious first order of business for people like us, in order to avoid running afoul of the law, is to familiarize yourself with your state and your municipality's self-defense laws. The most probable best course of action is to take a concealed carry class, because they're going to have a pretty good understanding of what you can and cannot do in your jurisdiction. The last thing we want to do is render ourselves politically inert by doing something dumb and illegal and ending up rotting behind bars.
My job.
You also have to understand that using actual force should be the very last tool in your toolbox. If you're using force, it means that everything else has failed. There is no unpulling that trigger, and the eyes of the world will be watching you. Don't do anything to discredit us. In the vast majority of cases, our simple presence should be enough to dissuade any malactors from doing whatever it is they want to do. Let them shout at you. Let them taunt and insult you. Do your best to get actual law enforcement agencies involved and on your side. You have to be disciplined. You're not a vigilante. Now, another point of consideration is that optics in these situations matter more than anything else, probably more than the actual facts of the case. We have to look like the good guys. What we don't need is some unwashed, obese, neckbeard-looking dude running around and embarrassing us.
Of course I'm no happy. Look at me, I'm a big fat slob.
First of all, if that's you, fix yourself before you're trying to fix the country. Doing this sort of thing is an athletic endeavor, so you'd be better off at home anyway. But if the public at large is shown someone who, quite frankly, looks gross, they're immediately going to be turned off to whatever it is you're trying to do. Similarly, all you gear goons out there who dropped tens of thousands of dollars on kit, sorry, but we don't need people out there who are going to make us look like some sort of fascist death squad out of Vauch's nightmares.
Law? What are you, a fucking liberal?
It's okay, and I would in fact encourage you to wear bits and pieces of odd military surplus that would be practical. What comes to mind first and foremost is some sort of plate carrier with magazine pouches. Now, everything else that the modern Minuteman should be carrying is, again, beyond the scope of this video, and perhaps we'll talk about it at a later date. But you should also have some sort of radio and a rifle and that sort of thing. But you have to look like just a normal, clean-cut, regular guy. You have to humanize yourself to the public at large. You have to be somebody they can relate to and identify with. Wear civilian clothes. As much as I'm concerned about OPSEC, I mean, consider not obscuring your face, or at the very least, not obscuring your eyes. If you're wearing some sort of mask, you just start to look like some random stormtrooper out of a movie. You start to look like a villain. Recent events where shitlibs have identified members of the military and gotten them in a lot of trouble for wearing edgy morale patches should tell you that patches of any kind, especially edgy right-wing meme patches, are a bad idea too. For this to be successful, you can't be a soldier. You can't be a militiaman, as it's commonly understood. You have to be some regular guy who's just trying to stop his house from burning down.
I'm just a regular, everyday, normal guy.
And they will use anything they can grab a hold of to make you look like the opposite of that. The obvious hurdle and elephant in the room here is you'll need to go outside and interact with people and form some sort of group in order to make any of this work. We need to be careful that these organizations aren't infiltrated by any malactors, whether somebody who's on our side and just misguided, or somebody who's on the side of the powers that be that are intending to make us look bad. And that's a problem and a question to which I don't have the perfect answer. The best I can come up with is decentralization is a must. Anything that's taking place online is 9 times out of 10 going to be infiltrated by the federal government in some way, shape, or form.
God damn FBI don't respect nothing.
The best I can say is don't organize anything over the internet. Intelligence agencies have a lot of fancy equipment designed to monitor for that sort of thing. And don't commit any crimes.
Stop breaking the law, asshole!
So all I can really say is my advice is don't associate with anybody you don't know personally, or somebody that can't be vouched for by somebody you know personally. And by know personally, I mean somebody that you've had a personal relationship with for several years. Now, the last thing is that this modern day Minuteman movement that I'm advocating for here is meant for extreme circumstances. This is for whenever the next 2020 type event is going to come around, where cities are on fire, businesses are being looted, and nobody is stopping it. This is for when hordes of migrants are pouring across the border and nobody is lifting a finger to stop it. So I guess if you're living at or near the border, your time to do this is now. This is not for regular, commonplace, petty crime. This isn't for you to go patrol the streets of Chirac. Like it or not, that's ordinary. Let ordinary organizations handle it if they can and are willing. The goal here, beyond the obvious protection of ourselves and our property, is to provide the government with a no-win scenario in extremely politicized environments and events. They either allow us to do what we're doing and protect ourselves, use the force of law to prevent us from upholding the law, or to step up and enforce the law like they're supposed to be doing.